Hello, I am Jairo Bulyedo, Rappler reporter, and you're watching Rappler Recap. Together with me is Judesca Villan, our senior researcher who covers human rights, war on drugs, and she focuses on telling the stories of the families of the drug war victims. We'll also talk to Fadi El Abdallah, the current spokesperson of the ICC. So a few hours ago rather, the ICC Appeals Chamber released its decision allowing the ICC prosecution to continue the probe into the drug war killings and to answer a few questions and give us some clarification about the recent decision of the ICC Appeals Chamber. We will talk to Fadi El Abdallah, the ICC spokesperson. Welcome to Rappler, Fadi.
Hello. Hello.
Good evening, Fadi from Manila. First questions first, Fadi. One of the striking points that was mentioned earlier was that the ruling was not based on the jurisdiction, but rather on the appeal of the Philippine government. But basically, it's not about the jurisdiction. Can you tell us more about this? Can you expound and explain this?
Well, it's a technical question. What we had today is a judgment of the appeals chamber. And the appeals chamber had to examine certain arguments that were put forward by the Philippines authorities. The mechanism of appeal by itself means that the chamber of the appeal has to examine if the pretrial chamber has correctly applied the law. So that means that the appeal chamber would not check something that was not checked by the pretrial chamber, because the mechanism of appeal is to allow the appeal chamber to confirm or to review what has been already decided, but not points that were outside what has already been decided. So the decision that is the object of the appeal itself, it's not a decision on the jurisdiction. It was a decision authorizing the prosecutor to resume the investigation. So there was already a first decision authorizing the opening of the investigation. The Philippines asked for a deferral. Then the prosecutor asked to resume the investigation. And then we had this new decision authorizing the prosecutor to resume the investigation. And that decision is the one that was the object of the appeal. So that decision, simply authorizing the prosecutor to resume the investigation, is not a decision on the jurisdiction. The matter of the jurisdiction was already decided in the first decision authorizing the investigation. So what the appeals chamber said today by majority, because 3 judges agreed and 2 judges had a dissenting opinion, but the majority of the appeals chamber said that one of the arguments of the Philippines is that the court should not have jurisdiction over the alleged crimes. And that has not been raised before the pretrial chamber at that time. So for the appeals chamber today, it was something outside the decision that they are reviewing, and thus they will not make a ruling specifically on that point. And they said, I mean, there are some other technicalities related to that, but that's in a nutshell the issue of why the majority considered that it did not need to rule on the jurisdiction now, because it was not in the decision that is the object of the appeal. The dissenting opinions of the judges had a different approach, and they considered that we should first check the issue of the jurisdiction. And in the view of the 2 judges that had dissenting opinion, that the court should not have jurisdiction over the alleged crimes because the prosecutor started the investigation after the withdrawal became effective. But as I said, this is not the decision. This is the dissenting opinion of the 2 judges.
Yeah, basically, in the course of the appeal process, the Philippines had raised many times the issue on jurisdiction. First, they mentioned or they reiterated that the ICC has no jurisdiction over the Philippines because when the probe started, the Philippines already withdrew from the Rome Statute. So basically, even though the Philippines reiterated it in its communications and appeal, it did not affect in any way the appeals chamber decision. Is that correct, Fadi?
As I said, by majority, the appeals chamber considered that this point has not been raised before the pretrial chamber regarding the decision that is the object of the appeal today, and thus the appeals chamber will not be reviewing it because it's not part of the decision.
Yeah.
You know, the appeals is reviewing a decision that is made and not reviewing other points outside of it. So that's why the majority considered that this issue was not in the process, let's say.
Yeah. Just a offshoot question. Can you clarify to us when does an ICC probe start? Does it start during the preliminary examination officially or during the actual investigation?
Well, in relation to Philippines, specifically, the prosecutor decided to open an investigation on his own initiative. And thus, the official opening of the investigation is when he would receive the authorization of the pretrial chamber. So that was already a certain time ago. Then there was a deferral, then there was a decision to resume, etc. But the opening of an investigation officially is related on the authorization of the pretrial chamber if the investigation is based on the own initiative of the prosecutor and not on a referral by a state party or by the Security Council.
Yeah, just going back to the ICC Appeals Chamber decision, what can the Philippines do or what can the Philippine government do about this ruling since that the ICC Appeals Chamber said that it's no longer appealable? In theory, can the Philippine government use this to improve their arguments before the pretrial chamber? What can they do about this?
I wouldn't be in a position to speak on behalf of the Philippines authorities. The system of the Rome Statute is that there is an investigation, the prosecutor has been authorized to resume it, and then it's for the prosecutor to gather the evidence and submit it to the pretrial chamber. Of course, the prosecutor and the pretrial chamber will need to examine that there is no duplication, that if there is genuine investigations on the national level for the same individuals, for the same alleged conducts, then the issue of complementarity may be raised before pretrial chamber, etc. But this is the general framework of how the ICC functions. There is a principle of complementarity between the national authorities and the ICC. The ICC is not designed and is not created to be, to have all the cases before it. No, the primary responsibility is for the national tribunals. But if they are not doing the investigations, or if they don't have the capacities, or they don't have the will to conduct genuine investigations, it is only then that the ICC can intervene and have cases.
Yeah. Process-wise, if, let's say, the office of the prosecutor asked for a warrant or summons before, and the PTC or the pretrial chamber approved it, can the subject go to the appeals chamber to appeal the issuance of the warrant? Let's say this happens.
If there are legal arguments, it's always something that can be raised before the ICC judges who will have to decide on it.
But is it the appeals chamber? Is the appeals chamber the right authority to hear the appeal of the, let's say, for example, Rodrigo Duterte has been issued a warrant of arrest? Can he appeal it before the appeals chamber, or it depends?
But first, I would not enter into hypothetical arguments. The prosecutor has to gather the evidence and submit it to the pretrial chamber. Any defendant benefits from the presumption of innocence, and they have rights before the court that they can properly raise first before the pretrial chamber and eventually, if need be, before the appeals chamber. But what I can assure you is that the ICC investigation is not directed against a specific person. The ICC investigation and the investigator have to gather the evidence that is available, whether it is in support of the accusation or in support of the defense, and they have to communicate that and submit it to the judges, who will then decide to issue a summons to appear or a warrant to arrest, or to reject the prosecutor request, depending on the legal arguments.
Yeah. Just going back to the warrant, just to clarify, Fadi, and for our viewers here in the Philippines, has a warrant been requested by the Office of the Prosecutor, or are we not allowed to divulge information about this?
Well, at this stage, I think it's has been just a short time that the prosecutor has been authorized by the pretrial chamber to resume the investigations. The office of the prosecutor has to do its job, as I said, gathering all the evidence, analyzing it, trying to identify the possible suspects that might be highly responsible of certain crimes, and then submitting it to the judges. By definition, the investigation is confidential, and it's only if the prosecutor or the judges wants to make certain aspects public that this can be done. But at this moment, the investigation is confidential, and there has been no requests or decisions that have been announced.
All right. But on the process of the ICC, how long does it usually take for a warrant request to be approved? Does it take, let's say, months, years, decades, let's say?
It will depend. It will depend on the prosecutor's capacity to gather enough evidence and how quickly that can be done. And there are various scenarios. We've seen that with different investigations by the court. Some things can go very fast. Some things can take much longer. It depends on the availability of the evidence.
Yeah. Speaking of complementarity, you already mentioned that, of course, the ICC relies on the complementarity and, of course, with its member states. And speaking of, let's say, warrant, for example, in a situation that a warrant has been issued, what role can the Interpol or the International Police play in the issuance or in the warrant, let's say, in the service of the warrant?
I think we need first to make a distinction between complementarity and cooperation. Complementarity, it's a legal criteria that simply means that the primary responsibility to prosecute, to investigate and prosecute is for the national tribunals, and that the ICC is a court of last resort. This is the principle of complementarity. So if before the national tribunals there are the same cases, basically, then the ICC should not open the same case again. The cooperation is a totally different matter. The ICC does not have a police force, does not have a military force, and relies on the cooperation of the states, parties and non-parties, to implement certain decisions, including the decisions when there are arrest warrants. So, of course, the ICC relies on the cooperation of the states, parties who have an obligation, or on the voluntary cooperation of states that are not parties to the ICC Rome Statute, but they can cooperate on a voluntary basis, including to arrest suspects if they are on the territories of the states and surrender them to the ICC. But this is a cooperation. This is not complementarity, and this is not related to the process of delivering the arrest warrant. The issuance of an arrest warrant is decided by the ICC judges based on the request and the arguments and the evidence presented by the Office of Prosecutor. It's after a decision is made and after an arrest warrant is issued, then the court will seek the assistance and the cooperation of the different states to implement this decision.
And on the implementation of the said warrant, what would the Interpol play in this situation?
I mean, there is an agreement, let's say, between the prosecutor office and the Interpol to assist, etc. But the main element remains the same. It's always national authorities that have to do the arrest, of course, and the surrender to the ICC.
All right. You mentioned earlier the criticism on the ICC. I mean, there's a criticism on the ICC that the ICC, of course, has no police or military powers, and there are critics who say that the warrants issued can be meaningless, especially that no trial can proceed in absentia. What do you say about this?
Well, it is very simple. It's like on the national level, you have the courts and you have the police. It's not one body. And it's the same thing for the international tribunals. You have the tribunals, and then you have the police, which is the police of the states that are parties to the Rome Statute, or states that have the obligation to cooperate with the court, or the states that voluntarily would want to cooperate with the court. But it is totally understandable that a judicial body would not have a military force.
Just last question, Fadi, for tonight. What, in essence, in a nutshell, what is the essence or what is the significance of the appeals chamber decision on the overall probe of ICC into the drug war killings in the Philippines?
Well, in relation to the Philippines, the decision today confirms the pretrial chamber decision that had authorized the prosecutor to resume the investigation um, after there was a request by the Philippines to defer the matter to the national tribunals. So simply said, that means that the prosecutor can now continue with the work of gathering the evidence, building the cases, and submitting requests to the pretrial chamber, who would have then to decide on them.
All right. Thank you so much, Fadi, for your time and for answering our questions and queries regarding the ICC Appeals Chamber decision. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Have a good day too. At this point, we will go to the details of the ICC Appeals Chamber's decision. Of course, earlier, the ICC Appeals Chamber decision issued its decision to allow the resumption of the investigation into the drug war killings. And of course, this is a big deal for the drug war victims in the Philippines because they pinned their hopes into in ICC to probe the Duterte killings, especially that ICC prosecutors had already said that there's no genuine investigation in the Philippines. So now, of course, we will talk to our senior researcher, Judes Gavilan, to discuss the reaction and the thoughts of the families of the drug war victims. Judes?
Yeah, hi. I want to begin by saying that, of course, people are saying of that in the story of our colleague Lian Buan, who also covers the ICC, it says that the decision is both big and small. Big because it means that the investigation can continue. Small because it doesn't really move the timeline and significantly. But for the victims, the families of the victims who have been waiting for so long to get a glimpse of justice for their loved ones who were mercilessly killed by Duterte's drug war, it is significant. First, because it means that an international court basically affirms what they've been saying for so long. They're saying that the justice system is not working in the Philippines and that they cannot get any semblance of hope here, so they rely on the ICC. Just by the mere fact that the appeals chamber junked the appeal of the government, which has for many years under the Duterte administration and also under the Marcos administration been telling the victims that the justice system in the Philippines is working. We can give you justice. But the matter of fact, what's happening on the ground is the opposite. By the fact that the ICC sees this, basically affirms what the prosecution had been saying for so long, it basically affirms what the families are saying. But also on the flip side, the families also acknowledge that it will be a long road ahead. We're seeing statements from the victims, groups of victims, human rights groups, saying that it is a step towards justice. What I've been saying, noticing, Jairo, regarding the statements of the family, specifically the statement of Rise Up for Life in Philippines. This is a group of widows and those left behind by the drug war victims. They are not only just welcoming the decision of the ICC appeals chamber, they're also calling on the other victims of the families to organize among themselves, to come out in the open, basically as basically asking them to let's join our forces, let's gather together, let's make our case stronger, and basically parang it's like an acknowledgement that we the families who have been open since the beginning, calling out the injustices, we've done this and we see there are results. Even if we say that it's not a conviction, it's not someone going to jail, but an international court affirming what they've been saying so long. We've achieved that, and maybe you can join us, and if you join us, we can achieve greater things in our quest for justice. That's what they've been saying. And if you remember kasi the process, of course, iba yung iba yung legal explanation that the process began as so-so, but the process, I mean, the ICC took note of what's happening in the Philippines October 2016. It was then Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda who said that they are monitoring what's happening in the Philippines. October 2016, thousands na namatay dan, thousands ng families, widows, orphan children, and thousands na rin yung mga umiiyak gabi-gabi na sinasabi nila na walang hustisya sa Pilipinas. 2016 to now, that's almost, tama ang math ko, 7 years na walang nangyayari. And ilan na ba yung conviction? 3 convictions. And hindi, out of the thousands who died. So for just this ICC move, this appeals rejecting the bid of the government to block the investigation, to block the resumption of the investigation, that's a huge deal. And I'm really looking forward to how the families will take this to grab this opportunity and maximize it for their advantage. So sinabi rin nila ng mga statements na they're calling on also religious groups, civil society outside of the usual human rights groups to band together and provide avenues for the families to talk, provide calls. But also significant thing na sinasabi rin nila, nakita ko sa mga statements, sa reactions ng mga families, is it is high time for the Marcos government to walk its talk. Time for him to parang bigyan yung laman yung mga sinasabi niya na he's different from his predecessor, na bigyan ng laman or bigyan niya ng action point yung sinasabi niya in the past na, yeah, there were abuses with the government. Or sinabi niya rin before, di ba, na parang yung focus on law enforcement, parang less yung na-achieve niya, kaya mag-focus siya sa rehabilitation. Yung sinasabi niya na ganyan, hindi lang dapat daw enough yan na sabihin lang niya yan para i-fix moving forward. Presidente ka, may kapangyarihan ka mag-imbestiga, may kapangyarihan ka ngayon na utusan yung gobyerno mo na makipag-cooperate sa ICC, sa investigasyon ni Karim Khan. So yan ang hinihiling ngayon ng mga human rights groups na President Marcos, wag lang puro ere yung sinasabi mo, wag lang puro pabango sinasabi lang, wag ka lang pabango sa international community. Bigyan mo ng laman yung sinasabi mo and walk your talk. And I'm looking forward to what the Marcos, President himself, would say. Ay wala pa so far na statement eh. So, titingnan natin, siguro in the next few days, magkaroon na ng statement ang presidente natin kung ano yung gagawin niya. Parang the ball is on his court na to prove na legitimate yung concerns niya sa nangyayaring abuso sa drug war ni Duterte.
And moving forward, pag pumunta tayo sa warrant stage, yun na yun. Yun na yung testing the waters scenario for Marcos government, testing the alliance of the Duterte and Marcos alliance. So now, let's move forward to the very quick lang, at a glance lang natin yung naging decision kanina ng ICC Appeals Chamber. So kanina binasa yon yung Appeals Chamber para yung Court of Appeals dito. Parang ang konsepto niya ay pag meron kang gustong i-assail na decision, pwede kang lumapit dun sa ICC Appeals Chamber at hingin yung tulong nun. So ang kanina, ang nagbasa ng decision ay si Presiding Judge Perrine de Brichambeau ng France, at doon sa may 5 judges yung yung Appeals Chamber ng ICC. 3 sa mga judges na yon from Peru, Poland and Uganda yung nag-decide na i-deny yung appeal ng Pilipinas, samantalang yung 2 judge, kabilang si Presiding Judge Brichambeau, ay nag-dissent or hindi sila bumoto in favor of the appeal. So basically sila gusto nilang i-terminate na yung investigation. So kanina ni-represent ni Philippine Ambassador to the ICC or to the Netherlands, J. Eduardo Malaya, yung Pilipinas. Kasama niya rin ang External Counsel ng Pilipinas na si Sara Bafadel. Kanina yung naging pinaka-meat nung decision ng Appeals Chamber ay nilay daw nila yung 4 na grounds na sinabi ng appeals ng pre-trial ng prosecutor kung bakit dapat magpatuloy yung investigation. Basically, just to wrap up lang yung sinabi nila, sinasabi ng Appeals Chamber na hindi daw malinaw yung mga naging argument ng Pilipinas assailing kung bakit dapat hindi magpatuloy yung investigation. Sabi nila ay hindi naman dapat, sinabi ng Pilipinas na hindi rin napaliwanag ng maayos ng Pilipinas, rather, yung kung bakit may issue ng jurisdiction doon sa case. Pero kanina, maliwanag din na sinabi ng korte na ang medyo magulo lang medyo technical ng konti ay hindi daw jurisdiction, hindi daw issue ng jurisdiction yung appeals chamber decision na ito, but rather on whether nagkamali ba yung pretrial chamber nung pinayagan niya na magpatuloy yung investigation. So basically, pinaliwanag kanina ni Fadi El Abdala ng ICC na hindi siya jurisdiction issue kasi hindi naman siya na-raise doon sa pre-trial chamber. So parang from the very start, it should have been raised rather, kaya hindi siya pinagdesisyonan ng ICC Appeals Chamber. And to wrap up lang ang ating recap, ngayong gabi, basically, itong pagpayag ng Appeals Chamber dito sa pagpapatuloy ng investigation, ibig sabihin lang nito, magpapatuloy yung investigasyon sa drug war ni Pangulong Duterte, dating Pangulong Duterte, at magpapatuloy yung investigasyon para dito. So maraming salamat sa Judes Gavilan sa pagsama sa atin ngayong gabi. Muli, maraming salamat po sa panonood. Ako po si Jairo Boliedo and this has been Rappler Recap.